There's different names. It's called the handless maiden, but I would like to call her the fearless maiden. There once lived a miller, a very poor miller. He lived with his wife and a beautiful daughter in the village. The miller used to go to the forest to collect firewood. Just like every day, he left to the forest to pick up some firewood. As he was picking firewood, he heard some ruffle in the leaves. And just then, a very strange looking man walked from behind the tree. What good is all the firewood for you, miller? I can fill your house with gold if you can give me what lies behind your old mill now, said the strange man. The miller thought for a while what was behind his old mill was just an apple tree and he could cut it off. In exchange for all the gold and all the luxury, he agreed. He made an agreement. He made a deal with the stranger. He shook hands and he said, "All right, I will be back to get what is rightfully mine," said the strange man, and he left into the dense forest. The miller came back home to find his house filled with gold, and his wife immediately asked him, what is going on? Why do we have so much gold? When she learnt what had happened in the forest, "You fool," she said. "What? The person that you have met is none other than the evil himself, and what was behind our old mill was none other than our own daughter. She was cleaning the shed behind the mill." The miller was shocked. His wife was scared. But there was so much gold in the house. A year passed. The strange man did not come. 2 years passed. 3 years had passed, and there was no sign of the strange man. Until one fatal morning, there was a knock at the door. The miller opened the door. "I am here to take what is rightfully mine. Send your daughter with me, miller," said the strange man. Just then, the miller's daughter had finished her bath and she walked in. She walked in wearing a beautiful white dress. "Ah, she is too clean. I cannot take her. Don't give her any water. I'm going to be back tomorrow." And he left. The girl she fell on her knees. She was shocked. She was shattered when she learned what was going on. She cried all night. She cried into her hands all night long. And the next day, when the strange man came back, her hands are too clean and I cannot touch her. "Cut off her hands, miller. Cut off both her hands. Otherwise, it'll be you whom I'm going to take." And he left. A promise is a promise, isn't it? A deal had to be kept. The young girl offered her hands to her father. The miller took an axe. His hands were trembling, and in a quick blow, he cut off both her hands. The girl stood there, watching her hands in a pool of blood. She cried. She cried into the stumps of her hands, not sure if it was because of the pain of her hands being cut or the pain of betrayal of trust. Well, the next day when the strange man came, the stumps of her hand was so clean that he could not touch her. And he had only 3 chances to take her. And he just left because he couldn't touch the maiden because she was too clean. Well, the mother went and hugged her, and the father said, "Don't worry, my darling. We have enough luxury, gold, and we're going to take care of you for the rest of your life." She did not want to stay there, even for a minute. She thanked her parents for what they had given her so far. She got her hands tied behind her back and she said, "The time has come for me to go. The time has come for me to take that journey myself. Let me see what destiny has in store for me, the places that I can go, and the people that I am destined to meet." And she left. She just left into the forest. She walked through the meandering paths of the forest, in the dense, dark forest. For long, she was now feeling hungry and thirsty, and without her own hands, she could not even feed herself. And soon, she was in front of a beautiful orchard, which was owned by the king of that land. There was juicy, succulent peaches hanging from those trees, and she was so hungry. She reached out with her mouth, and the tree bent down to allow her to feed herself with this juicy peach. As she quenched the hunger, the king was there, who confronted her. She looked into his eyes, and he looked into hers. She narrated her story, and the king fell in love with this beautiful maiden at that very spot, and he asked her if she would marry him. He even got silver hands replaced for her, and she went to the palace, and there was a beautiful wedding. Well, that is not the end of my story. The king had to go to a war, and within very little time, the young maiden, the young princess, gave birth to a baby boy. The queen mother sent a message to the king, who was in a faraway land, with a messenger that his wife had delivered a baby boy. The messenger, who was going through the forest, fell asleep, strangely fell asleep in the middle of the forest, and the message was changed. The evil was waiting for a chance, and this message was replaced. And what the king read said, "Your wife had given birth to a monster." Well, the king had sent a message back that, "Take care of my wife until I come back." But strangely, the messenger again fell asleep in the middle of the forest, and the message was exchanged again. And what the queen mother read said, "Kill my wife and my child." The maiden did not want to stay there in that palace even for a second after what she had read. She tied her child close to her chest with a cloth, and she left the palace. She left again, just into the wilderness, into her own journey. She walked, but now she had her child to take care of. After a long journey, she came into what looked like a hut, and "Everyone lives here with joy and happiness" was written on that hut. She knocked on the door, and a very kind woman opened the door. She welcomed the maiden and the child. Well, as she was taking care, nursing her child, as she was seeing her son grow, maybe Maybe it was the power of motherhood. She healed and she regrew her own hands back again. The joy of raising her son. As for the king, as for the king who came back from war and was eagerly waiting to meet his wife, wondering what had happened, why she had delivered to a monster, and all that, the queen mother, who was really hurt by that message, shared it with the king. Well, he immediately knew it was the work of the evil, and he had to go. He had to leave the palace and go and look for his wife and his son. And he set out. For 7 years, the king wandered without food and water, looking for his wife and his son. He looked for them everywhere. And finally, he too came to a hut which said, "Everybody lives here with joy and happiness." He was tired. He was tired with his journey, and he just sat there at the door. The kind woman was none other than the fairy godmother herself. She recognized the king. She united the king with his wife and his son. He was shocked, joyed, rejoiced to see that his wife had regrown her hands. He was so delighted to see his son. They embraced and they wept for hours. The king took his wife and his son back to the palace, and another wedding was arranged between the king and his lovely maiden. And maybe it was celebrating the rebirth of the king, of his wife, and his lovely son. Thank you.